The cell was small, dark, and cold, made of black stone that seemed to drink every bit of light. She had lived inside those walls for so many years that she had forgotten what the stars looked like. 13 years had passed since the Baron first locked her there, and every single day had been filled with pain. Heavy iron chains cut into her wrists and scars ran across her arms and back, marks of endless torture. The Baron loved watching her suffer. He would sit on his throne, smiling, while his guards carried out cruel punishments just to hear her scream. She had cried until no tears were left, and yet he never stopped. Her body had grown weaker, but something deep inside her refused to die. Even in the darkest nights, when she lay on the stone floor shaking from hunger and fear, a small flame kept burning inside her. She whispered to herself that one day, somehow, she would be free. Those whispers were the only thing that kept her sane. The Baron tried to break her spirit, but he could not kill that tiny piece of hope. The fortress was built like a monster itself, a place where no light entered. Guards patrolled every hallway, their armor heavy, their weapons sharp. They laughed whenever they passed her cell, mocking her, spitting cruel words. She had learned not to reply, not to show anger, because anger only brought more pain. Silence became her shield, but silence also made her heart heavier with every passing year. The Baron often visited, his tall frame blocking what little light there was. His eyes were cruel, his voice cold as he reminded her that no one would ever come for her. "You belong to me," he would say, his claws scraping the bars. "Your suffering is mine to command." Then he would laugh, and that laughter echoed through the dungeon long after he was gone. For 13 years, his words dug into her mind like poison. She remembered the day she was captured, a young girl with dreams, running in the sunlight. Soldiers dragged her to the fortress, and from that day, the sky became only a memory. Every morning in the prison felt the same, chains rattling, footsteps of guards, the sound of whips, and the cruel laughter of her master. Her hair had grown long, tangled, and her body thin like a shadow. The world outside seemed like a story from another life, but everything began to change on one stormy night. Thunder rolled across the sky, and for the first time in months, lightning flashed through the cracks of the dungeon ceiling. The guards were restless. They drank too much, their voices loud, and their footsteps uneven. She watched closely, her heart pounding. Something felt different. Her eyes followed one careless guard who left the small gate at the corner unlocked. It was only a crack, a small mistake, but to her, it looked like a doorway to life. Her heart raced faster than it ever had. She looked at her chains, at her thin hands, and at the dark hallway beyond. Fear filled her. Fear of being caught, fear of being punished worse than ever before. But a stronger feeling rose too, the desire to live. She waited, every second like fire in her chest, until the guards moved farther away, their drunken laughter fading into the storm outside. She took a deep breath and pushed her frail body forward. The chains rattled softly as she slipped her hands through the loose iron loop. It tore her skin, blood running fresh, but she bit her lip and did not cry out. Slowly, painfully, she pulled free. The cell door creaked when she pushed it, and for a moment she froze, sure that someone had heard. But the storm covered the sound, thunder shaking the stones above. Her bare feet touched the cold ground outside the cell for the first time in 13 years. Every step felt like stepping into fire, both from fear and from the wounds on her feet. She moved through the shadows, her body trembling, her breath quick and shallow. The fortress seemed endless, hallways stretching like the belly of a beast. She pressed herself against the walls whenever footsteps echoed nearby, her heart threatening to stop. She saw the main gate ahead, guarded but slightly open. The guards outside argued loudly, distracted by the storm. Their voices rose, their attention far from the small shadow creeping through the corner. She knew this was her only chance. If she hesitated, if she waited for another day, she might never get another chance again. Her body screamed with exhaustion, her mind heavy with fear, but she forced herself to move. She crawled along the wall, every sound in the air sharp to her ears. When she reached the gate, she held her breath. The storm grew louder, lightning split the sky, and the guards turned away for a moment. That was all she needed. With the last of her strength, she slipped through the gate and into the night. Cold rain poured down, soaking her thin clothes, washing the dust and blood from her skin. For the first time in 13 years, she felt the sky above her. She lifted her face to the storm, the raindrops mixing with the tears she did not know she still had. The fortress roared behind her, guards shouting as they discovered the empty cell. She ran into the darkness, her body broken but her spirit alive, every step carrying her farther from the prison of shadows. For the first time, freedom was not just a dream. It was real, and it was in her hands. Rain poured over her as she ran through the wastelands, her bare feet sinking into the wet ground. The storm had covered her escape, but it could not cover her scent. The Baron's hunters were already released, monstrous alien hounds bred for only one purpose: to track and tear apart anyone who dared to run from him. Their howls echoed across the rocky land, long and sharp, carrying the promise of death. She stumbled over jagged stones, her body weak from years in chains, but fear pushed her forward. She did not look back. The wasteland stretched endlessly before her, a place of broken ruins and sharp cliffs. Once, long ago, it might have been a thriving city, but now it was nothing but shattered walls and twisted metal. Lightning flashed, showing the ruins for a second before darkness swallowed them again. She slipped into the shadows of broken towers, her breath heavy, her chest burning, every heartbeat screaming that she could not stop. Behind her, the ground trembled with the pounding feet of the hunting beasts. She pressed her back against a cracked wall, her body shaking. Her skin was pale and torn from the rough escape, her hair soaked and plastered to her face. She tried to control her breathing, tried to make no sound, but the hounds were close. Their glowing eyes shone through the rain, scanning the ruins, their noses twitching as they sniffed the air. One of them growled low, and her heart nearly stopped. She pressed her hand against her mouth, fighting to keep silent. If she made one noise, they would find her. The hounds moved closer. Their claws scratched against the stone, their bodies massive, covered with spiked scales. Their fangs dripped with saliva as they snarled, waiting for the command to kill. She closed her eyes, wishing she could melt into the wall, wishing she could vanish. In her mind, she heard the Baron's cruel laugh. "You can run." His voice seemed to whisper, "But you cannot hide." Her body shook, but she forced herself to move. Slowly, she crawled along the broken wall, searching for another path. Her hands bled as she pulled herself over a fallen beam, the rust cutting into her skin. She ignored the pain, because pain was familiar. Pain was nothing compared to being dragged back into the dungeon. She crawled on her stomach through a gap in the rubble, her thin body barely fitting through. Stones tore at her skin, dust filled her throat, but she kept moving. The hounds sniffed the air, barking louder now. They had caught her trail again. She burst out of the rubble and ran, the ruins echoing with the beasts' howls. Rain blinded her, but she did not stop. Her lungs burned, her legs screamed with pain, but she pushed herself harder. The wasteland stretched on, endless and merciless, but ahead she saw something strange. Through the sheets of rain, glowing lights cut across the darkness, hovering low over the ground. At first, she thought it was the Baron's ships, and terror filled her. But then she noticed the shape. It was different. Sharp, metallic, moving smoothly in the storm. Her breath caught in her throat. She had heard stories whispered by slaves long ago, stories of outsiders, of strange beings called humans who fought the Baron's kind. She had thought they were lies, made to comfort prisoners. But now, before her eyes, she saw the truth. Bright beams of light swept across the ruins, scanning, searching. Human search drones moved across the wasteland like silent ghosts, their lights shining in the storm. For a moment, hope rose in her chest, but fear followed quickly. The humans were dangerous too, or so the Baron had said. He had told her that if she ever found them, they would destroy her because she was nothing but broken property. She hesitated, torn between running toward the lights or running away from them. Behind her, the hounds roared, their claws striking closer and closer. Their shadows leapt in the lightning, monstrous shapes that promised no mercy. Her choice was made for her. One of the hounds lunged from the ruins, its massive jaws snapping shut inches from her arm. She screamed and stumbled forward, barely escaping. Her body crashed into the mud, and the beast circled back, ready to strike again. She scrambled to her feet, her legs trembling, her heart racing faster than ever. Ahead, the human lights moved closer, bright beams slicing through the storm, and she ran toward them with every ounce of strength she had left. The hounds chased, their snarls filling the night. She could feel their breath on her back, the ground shaking under their weight. The storm raged, the ruins collapsed around her, but she kept running. Each step felt like her last, her body ready to fall apart, but hope pushed her forward. The lights grew brighter, clearer, until she could see the outlines of metallic machines hovering just above the ground. Their surfaces shone silver, glowing with strange symbols she did not understand. She stumbled into the open, collapsing on her knees, her body too weak to continue. She raised her hand, her voice broken, calling out to the lights. Help! Her words were swallowed by thunder, but the drones seemed to notice her. Their lights locked onto her thin figure, illuminating her in the rain. For the first time in years, she felt seen. The hounds burst from the shadows, their monstrous bodies racing toward her. But before they could reach her, the drones activated. Beams of energy shot from their undersides, bright and deadly. The ground exploded where the hounds had been, sending them scattering back into the ruins with angry howls. The machines hovered closer, their lights scanning her face, her scars, her chains. She collapsed onto the ground, exhausted and trembling, too weak to understand what would happen next. The wasteland was silent except for the storm. The hounds had fled back into the darkness, and the drones circled above her like guardians. She lay in the mud, her chest rising and falling heavily, tears mixing with the rain. She had escaped the Baron's prison, escaped the hunters, and now she was in the presence of the unknown. She did not know if the humans would save her or destroy her, but one thing was certain: her life had changed forever. Her body could not run anymore. Her legs shook like thin branches in the storm, and her chest burned with every breath. She stumbled through the canyon, the sound of rushing water echoing from below. Mud covered her feet, blood marked her ankles where the chains had cut deep, and her vision blurred with rain. She collapsed to the ground, her arms wrapping around herself as if she could hide from the hunters that still prowled the ruins behind her. She thought this was the end. If the Baron's hounds did not kill her, the storm would. Her lips moved weakly, whispering words she no longer believed, words for someone to save her. Through the noise of thunder, she heard different footsteps. Not the heavy claws of a beast or the iron steps of the Baron's guards, but softer, careful, almost human. She forced her eyes open, and through the blur of rain, she saw a figure kneel before her. A man in armor, soaked from the storm, his face half shadowed by a helmet. He reached out slowly, not with claws, but with a hand. His voice was steady, deep, and calm. "It's all right. You're safe now." She stared at him, too weak to move. His hand touched her shoulder gently, and for the first time in 13 years, a touch did not bring pain. It felt strange, almost frightening, but it did not hurt. Her body trembled as tears mixed with the rain. She tried to push herself back, still afraid it was a trick, but she had no strength left. He noticed her fear and pulled back slightly, showing he would not harm her. "You're hurt," he said quietly. "I won't let them take you." Behind them, the howls of the Baron's hunters grew louder. The soldier looked over his shoulder, his eyes narrowing. He pressed a device on his arm, and bright flares lit the canyon, driving the beasts back for a moment. His jaw tightened as he saw the chains still locked around her wrists. He knelt again and pulled a tool from his belt, snapping the metal apart with one quick strike. The chains fell to the mud with a heavy sound, and she stared at her free hands in disbelief. Freedom had weight. She almost didn't know what to do with it. He looked at her face, at the scars, at the hollow eyes that had seen nothing but suffering for years, and his anger rose. He did not know her name, but he knew what had been done to her. His people had heard rumors of the Baron's cruelty, but seeing the proof in front of him made his blood boil. Still, he kept his voice soft, because she was shaking like a frightened child. "You're safe," he repeated. "I'll protect you." Her lips moved, but no sound came out. Her throat was too dry, her voice broken from years of silence. She wanted to ask who he was, why he was helping her, why he didn't just leave her to die like so many others had done. But she could not form the words. He didn't wait for answers. With one arm, he lifted her easily, cradling her thin frame against his chest. She gasped at the sudden motion, her body stiffening. But then she felt the warmth of him, the steady beat of his heart through the armor. It was the first warmth she had felt in years. The canyon echoed with the hounds' growls as they climbed closer. The soldier looked up at the cliffs, then down the path where his dropship waited. He had little time. Every second brought danger, but every step carrying her felt like a promise he refused to break. He could have followed orders and left her behind. The rules were clear: no civilian interference, no rescue outside mission orders. But he was human, and humans did not turn their backs on someone who had suffered this much. The rain beat harder against them, but he kept moving. She clung weakly to his chest, her fingers curling into his armor, as if afraid he would vanish. She could hear the steady rhythm of his breathing, strong and calm, unlike her ragged gasps. She realized that even though her body was broken, for the first time she wasn't carrying herself alone. Someone else carried her burden, if only for a moment. They reached the edge of the canyon, where a small human outpost flickered with lights in the storm. The soldier pressed a code into the gate, and the heavy doors slid open. Alarms sounded as his comrades saw him carrying the thin alien girl in his arms. Voices rose, questions fired. Who was she? Why did he bring her? What danger followed behind? But he ignored them all. He pushed through, his grip steady, and laid her gently on a medical cot. She tried to sit up, panic flashing in her eyes. Too many new faces, too many strangers, and years of cruelty told her that more people only meant more pain. The soldier knelt beside her, blocking the others with his body. He spoke firmly to his comrades. She's under my protection. No one touches her without my word. His voice carried weight, and silence fell around them. He turned back to her, his hand brushing the wet hair from her face. Rest, he whispered. You're safe here. She looked into his eyes, searching for the cruelty she had always known, but found none. There was only anger at what had been done to her, and something else she had not seen in years. Kindness. Her lips trembled as she finally spoke, her voice cracked and weak. Why? Why help me? The words barely left her mouth, almost drowned by the storm outside. He paused for a moment, then answered simply, because no one deserves what you've been through. Her eyes filled with tears, but these were not the tears of pain. They were tears of something unfamiliar. Hope. She closed her eyes, her body finally relaxing as exhaustion pulled her into sleep. The soldier stood, watching her, his fists clenched. He had broken every rule by bringing her here, but deep inside, he knew he would break 1,000 more before he ever let her fall back into the Baron's hands. The Baron's fortress shook with his fury. When the guards reported that her cell was empty, his roar echoed through every stone hall. His claws dug into the arm of his throne, cracking the black steel beneath his grip. For 13 years, he had broken her body and spirit, keeping her alive only to taste her suffering, and now she had slipped through his hands. The thought that she had dared to escape burned his pride like acid. His eyes glowed red in the dim torchlight, and the soldiers kneeling before him trembled, afraid to even breathe. Find her, he thundered, his voice shaking the walls. Tear apart the wastelands, burn the ruins. I want her back alive, so I can make her beg for death. His hounds snarled, sensing his anger, and his generals bowed low, promising that every hunter, every ship, every spy would be used to capture her. He leaned forward, his massive body casting shadows across the hall. And hear this, he growled. If the humans touch her, if they dare to hide her, I will rip their bones apart and hang them on my walls. Even as he raged, his mind was already spinning with cruel plans. The Baron ruled through fear, and an escaped prisoner was a crack in his power. If word spread that one could flee his dungeon, others might try. He would not allow that weakness. He would crush her hope and use her screams as a warning to the galaxy. His fury was not only about her, it was about control. Far away from the fortress, the human soldier stood in the outpost's medical bay, watching the girl sleep. Her fragile body lay under a blanket, her face pale, her wrists still raw from chains. The storm had faded, leaving the world outside wet and silent, but inside his heart there was no silence. Rage twisted inside him as he thought of what she had endured. The scars on her back, the way she flinched at every sound, the hollow look in her eyes. None of it was natural. Someone had made her this way. Someone had stolen 13 years of her life. He clenched his fists, his knuckles white. He had seen war before, had seen cruelty, but never like this. His people had fought the Baron's armies for years, but this was no soldier's wound, no prisoner of war's scars. This was something worse. He knelt beside her, his hand brushing the side of the cot, careful not to wake her. She stirred slightly, whispering something in her sleep. Her voice cracked and broken. He couldn't understand the words, but the fear in her tone was clear. He leaned closer and said softly, "You're safe now. I promise." The door to the bay hissed open, and his commander entered, flanked by 2 officers. Their faces were hard, their eyes sharp with suspicion. "Who is she?" the commander demanded. "Why did you bring her here?" The soldier stood, straightening his back. "She's a prisoner of the Baron. She escaped." The commander's frown deepened. "And you thought it wise to bring her into our outpost? Do you know what this could mean? The Baron will see this as a challenge. He will not ignore it." The soldier's voice was firm, steady. "Let him come. I won't hand her back. You didn't see what they did to her. No one deserves that." The commander shook his head. "You are a soldier, not a savior. Our orders are to avoid drawing his wrath. If he comes here, hundreds could die because of your choice." The soldier's eyes burned with quiet fire. "Then let him come for me, but I won't let her go back to that monster." The officers exchanged uneasy glances. They knew the Baron's reputation, knew his cruelty. To protect her was to invite war, but to hand her back was unthinkable. The commander hesitated, then finally said, "You take full responsibility. If the Baron's forces attack, her blood and ours will be on your hands." The soldier nodded without flinching. "I accept that." When the commander left, the soldier returned to the girl's side. She was awake now, her wide eyes filled with fear as if she had heard every word. She tried to sit up, trembling, but he gently pressed her shoulder back down. "Rest," he said softly. "I gave my word. I won't let them take you." She stared at him, her lips parting, but no sound came out. Her throat was too dry, her voice too broken. Instead, she reached out weakly and gripped his hand. It was a small, fragile gesture, but it carried the weight of her trust. For someone who had been hurt for so long, trust was harder than blood. Outside, the outpost radar blipped. Human soldiers gathered around the screen, their faces grim. Dozens of signals were moving across the wastelands, Baron's ships, hunters, and patrols. The fortress master had already unleashed his wrath. The humans knew they had little time before the storm of war fell on them. The soldier stood by the window, watching the distant glow of engines in the night sky. His jaw tightened. The battle was coming, and it was because of the girl lying in the bed behind him. But when he turned back, when he saw her staring at the ceiling with eyes still haunted yet filled with a small spark of hope, he knew his choice was right. The Baron had taken everything from her. Her freedom, her voice, her years. But now she was here, alive, and he would not let that monster touch her again. In the fortress, the Baron stood on his balcony, staring into the storm. His army prepared below, ships rising into the air, weapons charged. His lips curled into a cruel smile. "Run to them, little one," he whispered to the night. "Hide in their arms. It will make it sweeter when I tear them apart in front of you." And in the human outpost, the soldier whispered his own vow, quiet but firm as steel. "You'll never go back, not while I still breathe." 2 worlds had spoken, 2 promises made, and only one would survive the dawn. The room was quiet except for the faint sound of the storm outside and the steady hum of the medical machines. She lay on the cot, her thin frame hidden under a blanket, her eyes half open as she watched the man who had saved her. He sat nearby, his armor removed now, only a simple shirt clinging to his shoulders, still wet from the rain. He did not rest. His eyes stayed sharp, scanning the room, as if ready to fight the moment danger came. She could not understand him completely, not his words, not the symbols on his uniform, but his presence was something she could understand. It was steady, warm, and unlike anything she had felt in 13 years. Her lips trembled as she tried to speak. At first, only broken sounds came, like a whisper of air. Her throat had forgotten how to use words. Her voice cracked from years of silence and screams. But he leaned closer, nodding, patient, waiting. "Take your time," he said softly, his tone calm. She closed her eyes, took a breath, and finally managed a word. "Pain." It was weak, almost lost in the hum of the machines, but he heard it. His jaw tightened, and his eyes darkened with anger, not at her, but at what had been done to her. He touched the edge of her blanket gently, careful not to frighten her. "No more," he whispered. The hours passed slowly, and little by little she found her voice again. broken phrases at first, then short sentences. She told him of the chains, of the dungeon, of how the Baron forced her to kneel while he laughed. She spoke of nights when she prayed for death, and mornings when she woke to more cruelty. She described the silence, the endless darkness, and the way she had stopped counting the years because each day was the same nightmare. Every word was heavy, but she forced them out because for the first time someone was listening. He did not interrupt. He did not look away. He sat still, his fists clenched, his breathing tight as her story unfolded. He wanted to promise her that it was over, that the Baron would never touch her again. But he knew the truth. Outside the walls of this outpost, the Baron's forces were closing in. Yet when she finished, when her voice broke and tears ran down her face, he placed his hand gently on hers and said, "You are safe now. With me, you are safe." Her fingers curled around his hand, as if holding on to those words. She wanted to believe them, wanted to let herself trust, but fear still sat deep in her heart. For 13 years, kindness had been a lie, a trick used to break her again. But there was something different in this man's eyes. They carried no hunger, no cruelty, only determination and sorrow. For the first time, she felt the weight in her chest ease just a little. The soldiers' comrades watched from a distance, whispering to each other. They did not understand why he risked so much for a stranger, why he defied orders and put them all in danger. But they saw the way she clung to him, the way his gaze never left her, and some of them began to understand. War was not only about orders and strategy. Sometimes it was about people, about refusing to turn away from someone who had suffered too long. That night, as she slept fitfully, he remained by her side. Every time she stirred with a whimper, haunted by nightmares, he was there, calming her with a quiet word or a steady hand. When she woke gasping, eyes wide with terror, he reminded her, "You're not there anymore. He can't hurt you now." Slowly, her body began to relax, her breath steadier, though her eyes still shone with shadows that would never fully fade. By morning, a small change had taken root. She sat up slowly, her hands shaking, and asked for water. He gave it to her, supporting her back as she drank. The simple act made her cry again, because in the dungeon even water had been given with cruelty, sometimes denied for days, sometimes poured on the floor while she begged. But here, it was offered with care. She whispered a word she had not spoken in years. "Thank you." He looked at her, his expression softening. "You don't need to thank me," he replied. But she did, because gratitude was the only way she knew to express the strange warmth inside her chest. It was fragile, like a flame flickering against the wind. But it was real. Hope. Outside the outpost, the world was not still. Reports came in of the Baron's ships moving closer, his soldiers spreading across the wastelands. Scouts whispered that the Baron himself had sworn to reclaim what he had lost, and his wrath would burn through anyone who stood in his way. The commanders argued, some saying the girl should be handed over to avoid bloodshed, others warning that surrendering her would break every oath they had sworn to protect the helpless. The soldier listened to none of it. His mind was set. He would not let her go. The girl sensed the danger, though no one told her. She saw it in the soldiers' faces, in the way they tightened their grips on their weapons, in the way their voices grew sharper with worry. Fear rose in her again, twisting her stomach, whispering that safety was only a lie, that the Baron would soon drag her back to the shadows. She trembled, clutching the blanket, her eyes darting around as if searching for escape. But then she felt his hand on hers again, steady and firm. She looked at him, and he nodded once. No long promises, no speeches, just a look that told her everything. He would not let her go, no matter what came. And for her, that was enough to calm the storm inside her heart. That day, as the sun broke through the clouds, she sat quietly beside him, still weak, but no longer completely broken. She whispered more of her story, her voice still soft but clearer now. And each word that left her lips was no longer just about pain. It was about survival, about the fact that she was alive despite everything. She began to realize that telling her story was not just a way to share her pain, but also a way to take back pieces of herself that the Baron had stolen. The soldier listened, every word carving deeper into his resolve. He knew the Baron's wrath was coming. He knew war would soon crash against their walls. But when he looked at her, When he saw her slowly rebuilding the pieces of herself, he knew his fight was no longer just about orders or missions. It was about her. And for that, he was ready to face anything. The night was restless, filled with the sound of engines in the distance and the low hum of alarms inside the outpost. Soldiers moved quickly, preparing defenses, loading weapons, and sealing the gates. Everyone knew the Baron's forces were close. The air itself felt heavy, like the sky held its breath before a storm. Inside the medical bay, she sat up on the cot, her thin hands clutching the blanket tightly. She could hear the whispers, the rushed voices outside. Even without understanding everything, she knew what it meant. The Baron was coming for her. Fear crawled through her chest, making it hard to breathe. Her body trembled as she remembered the sound of his voice, the sting of the chains, the endless nights of torture. She imagined being dragged back, her freedom ripped away, her hope crushed forever. She turned her face away, tears sliding down her cheeks. Her voice broke as she whispered, "He's coming." The human soldier stepped closer, kneeling so his eyes met hers. His hand rested gently on her arm, steady and firm. "Yes," he said quietly, "he's coming, but so am I, and I will not let him touch you again." His words were simple, but the weight behind them was strong. She searched his face, looking for a lie, but there was none. He meant every word. Outside, the first sound of war began. Explosions cracked in the distance, shaking the walls of the outpost. The ground trembled as the Baron's army surrounded the place. Searchlights cut through the sky, and the shrill cry of his hunters echoed over the hills. The soldiers inside braced themselves, weapons ready, their faces pale but determined. The commander barked orders, telling the troops to hold the line. The storm of battle had begun. The soldier led her away from the window, guiding her to a safe corner of the room. "Stay here," he told her. She gripped his wrist tightly, her eyes wide with panic. "Don't leave me," she begged, her voice raw with terror. For a moment he paused. He could not protect her and fight at the same time, but he also knew he could not leave her trembling in fear. He bent down, his voice steady. "I will fight, but I will not be far. I will always come back to you. Trust me." Her fingers loosened slowly and she let go. He stood, pulling on his armor, his rifle gleaming in the harsh light. With one last look at her, he turned and joined the others at the barricade. She pressed her back against the wall, her heart racing as she listened to the thunder of weapons outside. The Baron's forces attacked without mercy. Waves of soldiers charged, their monstrous hounds leaping ahead. Plasma fire lit the sky, explosions shattered the ground, and the outpost shook with every strike. The humans fired back fiercely, their guns blazing, their shouts mixing with the screams of battle. Smoke and fire filled the air, the night alive with chaos. The soldier fought on the front line, his rifle steady, his movements sharp and quick. Every time an enemy drew close, he drove them back. He shouted to his comrades, guiding them, protecting them, but his thoughts never strayed far from her. Behind the walls, she crouched in fear, covering her ears from the deafening sounds. Each explosion made her flinch. Each scream made her heart stop. She wanted to hide forever, but another voice inside her whispered that she could not give up. Not now. Not when freedom was so close. The battle raged for hours. The Baron's army pushed harder, sending in heavier machines, towering war beasts with armored hides. The humans were outnumbered, but they refused to break. The soldier led charge after charge, his determination giving strength to the others. Even when his arm was burned, even when blood ran from his shoulder, he fought on, never slowing. And then the air grew cold. A shadow fell over the battlefield, and silence rippled for a moment through both sides. From the sky, a massive warship descended, black as night, its engines roaring like thunder. The Baron himself had come. The ship landed with a tremor, and from its gates, the towering figure stepped out. His eyes burned red, his armor gleamed with cruel symbols, and his claws dripped with venom. His voice boomed across the field. "Return her to me, and I will spare your lives. Defy me, and I will tear your bones from your bodies." Fear washed over the soldiers. Some looked at each other, uncertain, their grips tightening on their weapons. The Baron's presence was like a shadow pressing down on their souls. But one man did not flinch. The soldier stepped forward, his rifle in hand, his body scarred and tired, but unbroken. He shouted across the battlefield, his voice cutting through the chaos. "She is not yours. She will never be yours again." Inside the outpost, she heard his voice. Her heart skipped as she crawled to the window, watching him stand before the monster who had owned her life for so long. Her breath caught in her throat. For 13 years, she had dreamed of someone defying the Baron, someone standing between her and the nightmare. Now it was real. The Baron's laughter shook the ground, cruel and mocking. "You are human, fragile, weak. Do you think you can protect her from me?" He raised his clawed hand, and the ground itself cracked with power. Yet the soldier did not step back. His eyes burned with fury and determination. "You will not touch her while I live," he said, his voice steady like stone. The battle resumed with new fury. The Baron charged, his massive frame tearing through walls, while the soldier faced him head-on. Sparks flew, fire roared, and the clash shook the field. Around them, soldiers and beasts fought. But the true fight had narrowed to two figures, one of cruelty and one of defiance. She pressed her hands to the glass, tears streaming down her face. Fear twisted inside her, but alongside it, something stronger grew. Hope. For the first time, she believed the Baron could be stopped. Not because she was strong, but because someone was willing to fight for her, even against impossible odds. As dawn began to break, the sky painted with fire and smoke, the battlefield burned with the promise that this fight was more than survival. It was a fight for freedom, a fight to end 13 years of suffering. And in that moment, though she was still trembling, she whispered into the light, "Please, win." The battlefield was covered in smoke and fire, the ground torn apart by explosions and the clash of weapons. Human soldiers fought desperately against the Baron's army, their shouts mixing with the roars of alien beasts. But in the center of it all, one fight burned brighter than the rest, the human soldier standing against the Baron himself. The towering alien moved with terrifying power, his claws cutting through steel, his voice echoing with fury. Every strike he made sent shockwaves across the field, and yet the human did not fall. The soldier's armor was scorched, his rifle half broken, his body wounded, but his will refused to break. Each time the Baron attacked, the soldier pushed back, firing, striking, and blocking with everything he had. The Baron sneered, his glowing eyes filled with hatred. "You cannot win," he growled, his voice like thunder. "You are only human." The soldier spat blood, raised his weapon again, and answered with a steady voice, "That's enough." The girl watched from inside the outpost, her hands gripping the edge of the broken window. Her heart pounded as she saw the two figures clash again and again. For years, she had seen only one truth, that the Baron was unstoppable, that no one dared to defy him. But now she saw something new. This man, wounded and exhausted, still stood against him. The impossible was happening right before her eyes. The Baron struck hard, his claws tearing through the soldier's shield, sending him crashing to the ground. Dust rose around him, and for a moment, silence fell. The Baron laughed, raising his claw to deliver the final blow. But before it could fall, the soldier rolled aside and drove his blade deep into the Baron's leg. The alien roared in pain, stumbling backward. The soldier pushed to his feet, blood streaming from his wounds, but his grip steady. "You will not take her," he shouted. The humans around him cheered, their courage sparked by his defiance. They pressed harder against the Baron's army, refusing to give ground. The Baron's fury grew, his voice shaking the air. "She is mine," he roared. He charged again, but the soldier met him head-on, firing one last round into the alien's chest before leaping forward and striking with all his strength. The clash was deafening, and when the dust cleared, the Baron staggered, his armor shattered, his body bleeding. His eyes glowed weakly now, no longer filled with certainty, but with rage and disbelief. He looked at the human, his voice breaking with fury. "You cannot win." The soldier stood tall, though his body trembled with exhaustion. His voice cut through the battlefield like a blade. "I already have. She is free." With one final strike, he drove his blade deep, and the Baron fell. The ground shook as his massive body collapsed, his roar fading into silence. The battlefield froze, and then the Baron's soldiers, seeing their master fall, broke into chaos. Some fled into the hills, others dropped their weapons, their courage shattered. Inside the outpost, she covered her mouth with trembling hands, tears streaming down her face. She could not believe what she was seeing. The nightmare that had haunted her for 13 years was gone. The man who had owned her life, her pain, her fear, was lying broken in the dirt. Her knees gave out, and she sank to the floor, sobbing, not from despair, but from a relief so heavy it crushed her chest. The soldier stood above the fallen baron, his breath ragged, his body nearly broken. He looked at the battlefield, at his comrades still fighting, and shouted, "Hold the line! Freedom is ours!" His voice carried strength, and the humans rallied, driving the last of the baron's army away. Slowly, the fire and smoke cleared, leaving silence broken only by the cries of the wounded and the crackle of flames. When the battle ended, the soldier turned back toward the outpost. Each step was heavy, his body screaming in pain, but he forced himself forward. Inside, she waited, her eyes wide with fear and hope. When the door opened and she saw him, battered and bloodied but alive, she rushed to him. Her legs were weak, but she stumbled forward, collapsing into his arms. He caught her, holding her tightly against his chest. She pressed her face into him, sobbing uncontrollably. "It's over," he whispered, his voice rough but gentle. "You're free now. He can never hurt you again." She clung to him as if she would never let go, her tears soaking his shirt. For 13 years, she had dreamed of this moment, but she had never truly believed it would come. Yet here she was, alive, safe, in the arms of someone who had fought for her when no one else would. The other soldiers watched quietly, some lowering their heads in respect. They had seen many battles, many victories, but this one felt different. This was not just the defeat of an enemy. It was the breaking of chains, the reclaiming of a stolen life. The soldier lifted her gently, carrying her out of the outpost and onto the battlefield. The morning sun was rising now, casting golden light across the ruined land. For the first time, she felt the warmth of dawn, not as a prisoner, but as someone free. She buried her face against him, her voice breaking with quiet words. "Thank you." He looked down at her, his eyes soft despite his wounds. "You don't need to thank me," he said. "You only need to live." She closed her eyes, her body finally relaxing, trusting his strength to carry her forward. As the sun climbed higher, the smoke faded, and the cries of war turned to silence. One truth remained clear. The Baron was gone, and the girl who had lived in shadows for 13 years was free. In the arms of the human who refused to abandon her, she found not just safety, but a reason to keep living. The nightmare was over, and for the first time in her life, she was stepping into a future that was hers.